Okay, so good news and bad news. Kontra age dibo? Good news first, okay? So the good news is we are almost there. So আমরা জানি chat GPT or say in general GPT এর যে T it stands for transformers, okay? So সেই transformer architecture এ আমরা চলে এসেছি এবং at this point of this course we have to pay a little bit of attention, okay? So বুঝলাম যে ভাইয়া okay, uh, we got the good news but what we really want to know is the bad news, okay? What's the bad news? So আমরা কোর্সের ওই পর্যায়ে চলে এসেছি যেখানে টিচার আপনাকে বলে তোমরা এতদিন যা যা শিখে এসেছো সব ভুয়া, সব পুরাতন, দ্যাটস অল ওল্ড নিউজ, সব ফেলে দাও, focus on what's next, okay? So I'm obviously not like one of those teachers. Actually I am a bit like those teachers, okay? So আমি বলবো এতদিন আমরা যা যা শিখলাম it's really a bit old, but trust me, it's not useless, okay? You'll see as we proceed. So a quick recap on what we know so far, okay? So course আমরা শুরু করেছি by seeing what really NLP is, the applications and the tasks of NLP. এরপর আমরা শিখলাম what sequence to sequence models do. So আমরা দেখলাম কিভাবে sequence to sequence model it takes an input sequence and it maps that input sequence to its corresponding output sequence, right? So হতে পারে it can be a task of say translation যেখানে we are mapping an English text to its corresponding Bengali translation, কিংবা হতে পারে text summarization যেখানে we are mapping a long corpus of text to its corresponding shorter version, or maybe হতে পারে next word prediction যেখানে আমরা একটা input sequence হিসেবে নিচ্ছি an incomplete sentence and we are mapping that sentence to its missing part, okay? The word or say the phrase we want it to predict, okay? So these are all about sec to sec or sequence to sequence models, right? But now প্রশ্ন হলো how is it different from transformers, okay? So what's the difference of sequence to sequence models and transformers? The first difference is transformers they can deal with long range dependencies, right? So যদি আমরা একটু মনে করে দেখি that sequence to sequence model it had some limitations. একটা classic limitation হলো আমাদের sequence to sequence model it cannot remember input texts that are very very long, okay? It can only remember the most recent words, right? So think realistically, right? So যখন typically we have say a text or a document that has hundreds or thousands of words, right? So now if our sec to sec model it has to process all that text, it would process all of that sequentially and it can only remember the most recent words, right? আমি যদি তাকে বলি okay, so তুমি 100টা word process করেছো, so what was the 100th word that came before, right? Can it predict? Most likely it cannot, right? But here's the catch, transformers it can deal with this long range dependencies, right? It can remember texts that are very very far away, right? So let's see a quick example, okay, of what I mean. Okay, so আমরা চলে এসেছি আমাদের সবার প্রিয় chat GPT, which is basically a fine tuned version of transformer architecture, okay? So what am I doing here? Okay, so remember আমাদের প্রবলেমটা কি ছিল? We want to solve the long range dependency issue, right? So let's see if transformer it can remember texts that are very very far away. So focus on this particular chat session, okay? So chat gpt তাকে আমি কিছু jokes provide করেছি, right? For example, if you look at this first joke, if there are any idiots in the room, will they please stand up, said the sarcastic teacher, right? So after a long silence, one freshman rose to his feet and blah blah blah. Okay, so আমি তাকে জিজ্ঞেস করলাম, how did you like the jokes? And it replied, as an AI language model, I don't have personal feelings or preferences. Then তাকে আমি আবার জিজ্ঞেস করলাম, no really, how did you like the jokes? And it responded in a similar way, but I insisted, no, you have to give an opinion. Okay, so as stubborn as ChatGPT is, it still did not answer my question. So you can skip this part. I became a bit hostile. So but don't worry, আমি মাফ চেয়ে নিয়েছি চ্যাট জিপিটির কাছে, so don't worry. But anyway, what I really want you to get from this particular chat session is here. Okay, so I asked ChatGPT, do you remember the first joke I told? Right? So what was the first joke? This one. If there are any idiots in the room, will they please stand up? And interestingly or surprisingly enough, not only did ChatGPT know the joke, it also tried to explain the joke for me. Okay, so যদি আপনি নোটিস করেন এই particular chat session, there are at least hundreds of words, right? And this is the word that came at the very very beginning of this chat session. But ChatGPT, which is built on a transformer architecture, it could easily remember what the joke was. Now think about it. Now compare this particular performance with what we learned in case of sequence to sequence models, right? So I don't think the sec-to-sec model could even remember what I said in the previous message. Okay, so this is the power of transformer architecture, that it doesn't process the texts sequentially and it can remember the text that was at the very very beginning. So this is the magic of transformer architectures, right? It can even remember the texts that appeared very long time ago in the farthest of distance. Okay, and I think it's always better to be polite to chat gpt, especially এখানে আমি যে কাণ্ড ঘটিয়েছি. I think you are all familiar with this particular meme, right? So why take chances, right? Better safe than sorry. So back to what we were saying before. Transformers can deal with long range dependencies. What else can it do? It can parallelize text processing. আমরা জানি ক্লাসিক সেক টু সেক মডেল যেমন রিকারেন্ট নিউরাল নেটওয়ার্ক LSTM কিংবা gated recurrent unit, in any case they process text sequentially, which is not very efficient for computation, right? But we know if we can parallelize text processing, so instead of processing one by one, we can actually process multiple pieces of text simultaneously. Although not necessary, if you have some background on neural networks, you know the importance of parallelization, right? So typically when we train a model in neural networks, we represent the weights and biases using matrix and tensors, right? So when we are, say, training a transformer, there are a huge number of matrix multiplications, additions, and tensor operations, right? So which can all be done easily with GPUs. We can leverage the power of GPUs when we are training a transformers, right? So this is a great advantage. Another big advantage is the attention mechanism, right? So before we even start to explain what this attention mechanism is, let us go back to a very interesting concept, which was word embeddings, right? So আপনার মনে প্রশ্ন আসতে পারে, what about word embeddings, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is word embeddings, we saw how effective it was, right? But the question is, word embeddings, is it perfect itself? So so আমি জানি বিষয়টা কিছুটা ফ্রাস্ট্রেটিং। ইউ আর থিঙ্কিং যে ওকে ভাইয়া আমরা দেখে আসলাম যে if we try to represent words into numbers and we try to use unique integer values, there was a problem with orders, right? আমাদের model, it can get confused with the order. So as an alternative, as an improvement, we used one hot encoding, কিন্তু ওখানেও আমরা আসলে খুব একটা লাভবান হতে পারি নাই, কারণ আমরা দেখেছি in reality when the vocabulary size is huge in millions, the binary vectors we use in case of one hot encoding, they can get huge, right? Which was extremely inefficient for actually training the models, right? So as an effective solution, we introduced the concept of word embeddings. যেখানে what we did was we basically represented the words with dense vectors instead of binary vectors, right? এবং যদি আপনার মনে থাকে, dense vectors, they were basically a series of floating point numbers having a fixed size dimensions or features, right? So প্রত্যেকটা floating point number, they would represent a feature, right? এবং আমরা এটাও জানি, the fascinating fact about embeddings were the words that would share similar features, আমাদের word embedding, it would put them in the same region in the vector embedding space, right? For example, king and queen, they actually share similarity in terms of their royalty, so they are in the same space, right? একই ভাবে পুরুষ এবং নারী, they share similarities in terms of their gender, so they are on the same space, and the same goes for the colors, the furnitures, etc., etc., right? So word embeddings, it can capture contextual and semantic similarities, right? For example, আমরা দেখেছিলাম that in say in a particular discussion, if we mention say Shakib, then we mention Mushfiqur Rahim, then maybe we are talking about Bangladesh national cricket team in general, right? So if that's the topic of our discussion, then if we apply word embedding, it's very highly likely that in the same discussion we may mention say Tamim Iqbal, we can mention about cricket, or we can mention about cricket bat, cricket balls, maybe umpire, maybe stadiums, pitches, and maybe even say Najmul Hasan Papon, right? We can do all of that because all of them, right, all of these words, they share similarities, right? So it's very highly likely that they would fall under the same topic or same discussion just because they share similar features, they share a contextual and semantic relationship. So does this solve all of our problems? You may think, yes, it looks quite good, right? But you'll see that language is not as simple as we think it is. So আপনারা যদি এই পার্টিকুলার দুটো সেন্টেন্স লক্ষ্য করেন, the first one, I saw a bat hanging upside down in the cave, and the second one, he used a cricket bat to hit the ball out of the field. So if you focus on the words bat in both of the sentences, it's pretty clear যে word দুটোর structure বা spelling it's exactly the same, but it's obvious that they mean something that is completely different, right? যেমন a particular bat, it means what? Badur, right? And what about this bat? It basically means a cricket bat, right? এখন কথা হলো আপনি কিভাবে বুঝলেন যে এই ব্যাট মানে বাদুর এবং এই ব্যাট মানে ক্রিকেট ব্যাট? What you did was you looked at the words surrounding the word bat. So প্রথম সেন্টেন্সটির ক্ষেত্রে আপনি দেখলেন the word bat is surrounded by words like hanging, upside down, then cave. এটা দেখে আপনি pretty much sure যে this particular bat it means badur, okay? And for the second sentence, you see around the word bat, you have cricket, then you have ball, then field, which basically signifies a particular word bat, it basically means a cricket bat, okay? So a particular word, tar meaning কি হবে এটা basically define করে তার আশেপাশে কি word আছে, right? Similarly, if you look at these two sentences, the first one, please turn on the fan, it's getting hot in here. A particular fan, it basically means a mechanical fan, okay? And যদি আপনি a particular sentence লক্ষ্য করেন, he is a big fan of that singer. He has all their albums. A fan মানে basically an admirer, okay? And what about this particular sentence? The bear walked through the forest, right? A particular bear, এর অর্থ কি? এর অর্থ হলো ভালুক, right? And what about this? I can't bear the thought of losing you, okay? A particular bear, it basically means endurance but tolerance, okay? So the point I'm trying to make here is একটা particular শব্দ, একটা particular word, it can be used in different sentences, but it can mean something that is completely different, right? And what about this particular set of sentences? If you focus on the word only, right? For example, যদি প্রথম সেন্টেন্সটা আমরা লক্ষ্য করি, only Lucy told Claude that she loved him, এর অর্থ কি? শুধুমাত্র লুসি ক্লডকে বলল যে সে তাকে ভালোবাসতো, right? Now if I change the position of the word only from this place to say another place in the sentence, for example, আমরা যদি এই particular sentenceটা নোটিস করি, Lucy told Claude that only she loved him, right? What's the meaning? যে লুসি ক্লডকে বলল যে শুধুমাত্র সেই তাকে ভালোবাসতো, right? So you see, depending on the position of a word in the sentence, the meaning can change completely. What about this particular sentence? Alice is a more experienced manager than Barbara, even though she is 10 years younger, okay? So যদি আমি আপনাকে প্রশ্ন করি যে what or who is this particular she is referring to, okay? So this particular she is referring to Alice, right? কেন? আমরা সকলেই জানি we have a natural assumption that অভিজ্ঞতা it's directly proportional to বয়স, right? So আমরা জানি যে একটা মানুষ তার বয়স যত বেশি হয়, it's more likely that he or she is more experienced, right? So what's the meaning of this particular sentence? আমরা basically বলছি যে অ্যালিস সে বারবারা থেকে অধিক অভিজ্ঞ, যদিও even though she is 10 years younger, যদিও সে বারবারা অপেক্ষা 10 বছরের ছোট, right? So even though আমরা তখনই ব্যবহার করি যখন something happens that breaks our natural assumption, right? So আমাদের assumptionটা কি? আমাদের assumption হলো একটা মানুষ তখনই অভিজ্ঞ হয় যখন সে বয়সে বড় হয়, রাইট? বাট আমরা এই সেন্টেন্সে ক্লিয়ারলি দেখছি যে অলদো অ্যালিস সে বারবারা অপেক্ষা 10 বছরের ছোট, despite that she is more experienced. Okay, and what about this particular sentence? Alice is a more experienced manager than Barbara even though she is 10 years older. So again the same scenario, যেখানে আমাদের ন্যাচারাল অ্যাজাম্পশন যে অভিজ্ঞতা বয়সের সমানুপাতিক, this assumption was nullified. Okay, so basically আমরা বলছি যে অ্যালিস বারবারা অপেক্ষা অধিক অভিজ্ঞ যদিও বারবারা is 10 years older, right? So in this case she is referring to Barbara, right? So Barbara সে অ্যালিস থেকে 10 বছরের বড় হওয়া সত্ত্বেও অ্যালিস অধিক অভিজ্ঞ। ওকে, আমি যদি আপনাকে জিজ্ঞেস করি আপনি কিভাবে একটি বাক্য বা সেন্টেন্স পড়ে থাকেন, how do you read a particular sentence, right? Let us consider this particular sentence. Shakib is a cricketer and he is an all-rounder. Okay, so যখন আপনি পড়ছেন the word Shakib, immediately you are looking for other words to understand who is Shakib, right? Or what are we actually talking about, right? What is the topic of this particular sentence? You try to understand the context of the sentence. Okay, so যখন আপনি দেখছেন the word Shakib and immediately after a while you're looking at the word cricketer and then he and then all-rounder, you are pretty much sure that a particular sentence is talking about Shakib being a cricketer and an all-rounder. Okay, similarly if you encounter the word cricketer, you'll try to find words similar to this particular word to understand the context of the sentence, right? So যখন আপনি encounter করবেন the word cricketer and you look around and you see the word Shakib, then he, then all-rounder, you're sure that we're talking about who? Shakib, right? So let us try to understand this concept of specific context and what this attention mechanism is all about, right? So if we focus on the word he, if we attend to the word he, or if we put attention to the word he, doesn't matter how you say it, okay, which words are relevant or provide context to the word he? These words, right? Shakib, cricketer and all-rounder. Okay, and what about these two pairs of sentences, right? So আপনি যদি প্রথম সেন্টেন্সটি পড়ে থাকেন, the machine executed the task because it was urgent. So if you attend or put focus on the word it, who is it referring to, right? It is referring to the word task. Okay, and how did you understand that it was referring to task? So যখন আপনি particular সেন্টেন্সটি পড়লেন, the machine executed the task because it was urgent. Okay, so task, it can be urgent, right? Similarly, if you look at this sentence, the machine executed the task because it was instructed to do so, right? So in this case, if you focus on the word it, what is it referring to in this case? It's referring to the machine, right? কিভাবে আপনি বুঝলেন? Again, you read the sentence, the machine executed the task because it was instructed to do so. So the only difference is the last part, right? Because it was instructed to do so, the machine was instructed to do so, and in this case the task was urgent. That's why the machine executed the task. So এত কিছু বলার অর্থ কি? Word embedding আমরা জানি it's very good at contextualizing words, right? So আমরা জানি word embedding, it puts the word having similar features on the same embedding space, right? So similar words are closer together. But problemটা কোথায়? Problemটা হলো word embedding, it can only generalize the context, right? For example, if we focus on the word machine, which words are nearby or which words are the neighbors to machine, right? It can be, say, fuel, it can be engine, it can be machinery, right? There are many words that are relevant to the word machine, but the thing is a particular word যেমন fuel, machinery কিংবা engine, these are not relevant to the context of this particular sentence, right? So a particular sentence say we are only interested about the machine executing the task because the machine was instructed to do so, right? What's the specific context of this sentence? Who are we really talking about? What are we interested in? We are interested in the machine, right? The machine is basically the specific context of this sentence. So although word embedding, it can give us a general context, right? Because it puts the similar words in the same embedding space. But what we really need is the specific context of this sentence, right? So the machine executed the task because it was instructed to do so. We're only interested about the machine. And what about this particular sentence? The machine executed the task because the task was urgent. Okay, we're interested in task. Task is the specific context, right? And what about this particular sentence? Shakib is a cricketer and he is an all-rounder, right? So we're not interested in, say, Tamim, or we're not interested in, say, cricket bat or cricket ball or umpires that are very relevant to the words cricketer or cricket, right? So word embedding যদি আমরা use করতাম in this particular sentence, it would give a general context এবং there would be so many words sharing similar features that are not very relevant to the specific context of this particular sentence, right? So in this particular sentence, we're only interested in Shakib being a cricketer and an all-rounder, right? We are not interested in cricket ball or cricket bat or umpires or Tamim Iqbal or Mushfiqur Rahim, right? So the point I'm trying to make is word embedding, they provide a generalized context, right? But what we really need is the specific context given a particular sentence, okay? And how do we get the specific context? This is where attention mechanism comes into play, okay? So attention is all you need is basically a paper which was published in 2017 by Google that basically revolutionized the field of NLP. এই particular পেপারে প্রস্তাবিত হয়েছিল এই particular architecture. A particular architecture, today we know this as the transformer architecture. So ভয় পাওয়ার কিছু নেই. Some of the topics you already know, for example input embedding, which is basically word embedding, then positional encoding, এটা আমরা পড়ে এসেছি as one hot encoding, and there are so many other technical terms এবং as I said earlier, this is only an introductory course, okay? So I don't want to overwhelm you with all the mathematical equations and formulas and derivations, okay? For simplicity and practicality, I only want to give you what's really necessary for you to understand how transformer works and the purpose of attention mechanism. For this course, we'll only focus on this particular part and zooming a bit more, which will reveal this particular architecture যাকে অনেক সময় বলা হয়ে থাকে self attention. So this is where we'll really focus, where we'll learn about queries, keys and values. Okay, Q, K and V. So what's the intuition behind transformers? Transformer architecture আমাদের কেন প্রয়োজন, right? To understand that, let us consider this particular sentence যেটা আমরা একটু আগেই দেখে এসেছি, right? The machine executed that task because it was instructed to do so, right? So what's the specific context of this sentence, right? So আমরা interested in the machine, we're only interested in the machine, right? কিভাবে আমাদের plain old sec to sec model এই particular সেন্টেন্সটাকে প্রসেস করবে? আমরা জানি sec to sec model, it only processes the sentence sequentially, one word at a time, right? And it can only remember the most recent words up to a certain limit. So একটা word which occurred many time steps before, our sec to sec model, it can never remember the word, right? So say আমাদের sec to sec model, it can process one word at a time and it can only remember the most recent 3 words. Okay, so যখন আমাদের sec to sec model, it is processing the word the, it has basically no memory, right? কারণ the, this is basically the first word, এর আগে কোনো শব্দই নেই. So যখন আমাদের model, it will process the word machine, now it has the memory of the word the. ঠিক আছে? So যখন আমাদের sec to sec model, it will process the word machine, it remembers the word the. Okay, so next when the model processes the word executed, now it will remember the words the and machine, and then when it will process the word the, it will remember all the 3 words that came before. Okay, so now this is where things start to get interesting. Okay, so যখন আমাদের sec to sec model, it will process the word task, it starts to forget words. Okay, so it's remembering the most recent 3 words, right? Machine, executed and the. But this particular the is basically the 4th word যেটা আমাদের sec to sec model, it will forget, right? The blunder happens when the sec to sec model will process the next word because. So what is the blunder? আমাদের sec to sec model, it forgot a very vital information, right? যদি আপনি এই সেন্টেন্সটা পড়ে থাকেন, you already know the specific context of this particular sentence is the machine, right? So যখন আমাদের sec to sec model, it's processing the word because and it can only remember the most recent 3 words executed, the and task, it already forgot the word machine, right? So this is the blunder. Okay, similarly when it will process the word it, again it already forgot the word machine. So you see the problem, right? There is a very high chance যে আমাদের sec to sec model, it won't be able to detect the specific context. For example, আমাদের sec to sec model এটা মনে করতে পারে a particular it is referring to the task and not the machine, right? কারণ it only has the memory of the word task, right? It forgot about the word machine. So a particular issue, we know this as long range issue যেখানে আমাদের sec to sec model, it forgets about the word machine. আরেকটা প্রবলেম হলো আমাদের sec to sec model, it can only process the words sequentially, right? It can't do parallel processing. So this is where the transformer architecture comes into play. The same sentence, the machine executed the task because it was instructed to do so. Our transformer model will process all the words simultaneously. Okay, so none of the word will be left out. Okay, so আমাদের sec to sec model এটা যেমন sequentially process করছিল and it could only remember the most recent 3 words and it would forget the words that it encountered before. A particular problem কিন্তু আমাদের transformer architecture এ থাকছে না, right? Because it processes all the words simultaneously. None of the words are left out. So we already got rid of the long range issue, plus we achieved parallel processing. Okay, back to word embedding. Okay, what was word embedding? Word embedding হলো এমন একটি টেকনিক যেখানে আমরা ওয়ার্ডগুলোকে represent করি with dense vectors. Okay, and dense vectors were basically a series of floating point numbers যেখানে এই floating point numbers basically signify certain features. Okay, and words having similar features will be placed in the same embedding space. Okay, কিন্তু সমস্যাটা কোথায়? word embedding এর সমস্যাটা কি ছিল? The problem of word embedding is word embedding, it would only give us a generalized context. Okay, but what we really need is a specific context. Okay, for example, a particular sentence, Shakib is a cricketer and he is an all-rounder, এখানে significant word গুলো হলো Shakib, cricketer, he and all-rounder. Okay, so if we want to plot the dense vectors or word embeddings of these 4 words onto a 2D space, it would look something like this. Okay, so as you can see, all-rounder, cricketer, Shakib, he, a particular word gulo, they are placed closer to each other. Okay, and if we want to plot other words having similar features, it would look something like this. Okay, so if you focus on the word all-rounder, আমরা জানি যে Shakib একজন all-rounder, so definitely Shakib will be closer to the word all-rounder. But if you notice the words Afridi, Shahid Afridi কিংবা Jack Callis, they are also closer to the word all-rounder. Similarly, if you focus on the word cricketer, the words similar to cricketer are cricket, then we have bat, ball, then helmet, umpires, and then there are other words that are very far away from the significant words like all-rounder, cricketer, Shakib or he, right? These words, for example, flowers or mountains, have nothing to do with cricket or Shakib or all-rounder, right? We ignored these words. সমস্যাটা actually কোথায়, right? So if we use word embeddings but dense vectors of the words as it is, then all these words, right, all these words that have similar features to Shakib, cricketer, he and all-rounder, আমাদের প্রত্যেকটা word consider করতে হবে, right? But the specific context of this sentence is Shakib being a cricketer and an all-rounder, right? For example, if we focus on the word cricketer, there are other words like bat, ball, helmet, umpires, basically cricket accessories, right? Are we really interested in these cricket accessories, right? Bats and balls and helmets? We are not, right? Similarly, are we interested in Shahid Afridi or Jack Callis? We're not, right? কিংবা here আশেপাশে যে different relevant pronouns গুলো রয়েছে him বা she কিংবা they, right? We're not interested in any of that, right? We're only interested in Shakib being a cricketer and an all-rounder, okay? So we don't want to use the word embeddings as it is, okay? So all-rounder এর যে vector embedding তাকে আমার বোঝাতে হবে যে ignore Jack Callis, ignore Shahid Afridi, you only have to focus on Shakib, okay? Similarly, cricketer এর vector embedding বা word embedding তাকে আমার বোঝাতে হবে do not focus on cricket accessories like bats and balls, only focus on Shakib. Similarly, he should focus on Shakib as well, okay? And also the word embedding of Shakib should know that we are interested in Shakib being a cricketer and an all-rounder, okay? So basically what we really want is the word embeddings of the word Shakib. It should be influenced by the word embedding of the word cricketer, he and all-rounder. The word embedding of cricketer should be influenced by the word embedding of Shakib, he and all-rounder. Okay, similarly, he should be influenced by Shakib, cricketer and all-rounder. And all-rounder should be influenced by he, cricketer and Shakib. Okay, so what we really want, সাধারণ যে word embedding গুলো রয়েছে, we want to transform these word embeddings in such a way so that the word embeddings of these four words are closer together. এটা করে আমাদের লাভটা কি হলো? আমাদের লাভ হলো যে আমাদের context it is narrowed down, okay? So previously যখন আমরা word embedding use করছিলাম as it is, we had to consider all these words, right? But যখন আমরা word embedding transform করে we narrowed it down to this small space, now we are ignoring these words. For example, Jack Callis, Shahid Afridi or bat, ball, helmet, we are actually excluding all of that, okay? And we are including words like Tamim, then Khulna, Bangladesh. These fall under the same vector space as these words, okay? So Khulna, why is the word Khulna in the same embedding space as these four words, right? Because karon we are talking about Shakib, right? Amra jani Shakibir bari Khulna, right? So since we're talking about Shakib, and not only that, we're talking about Shakib being a cricketer and an all-rounder, these words naturally come into this narrowed down contextual space, right? So this particular technique যেখানে we don't use word embeddings as it is, but we transform the word embeddings of each of these words যেখানে প্রত্যেকটা word it's influenced by other relevant or significant words around it, okay? This particular process is known as self-attention. With the help of self-attention mechanism, আমরা এটুকু ensure করতে পারি যে word embeddings they are not used as it is, right? We transform the word embeddings in such a way যে আমাদের context it's not generalized anymore. It's very very specific and narrowed down to what we really want. So the word embedding of a particular word is influenced by the word embedding of other significant words in such a way that the initial word embedding is transformed, okay, such that all the significant words pull each other into a narrowed down space, okay? So if we put attention or if we attend to the word Shakib, then this particular word Shakib, the word embedding of Shakib, will be influenced by the word embedding of cricketer, he, an all-rounder, which basically means the word embedding of Shakib will be pulled closer to the word embedding of cricketer, he, an all-rounder. Similarly, the word embedding of cricketer will be pulled closer towards the word embeddings of Shakib, he, an all-rounder. Okay, so the word embeddings of Shakib, he, an all-rounder will influence the word embedding of cricketer. Similarly, he will be pulled closer towards Shakib, cricketer, and all-rounder. Right? These three words will influence the word he. And finally, the word all-rounder would be influenced by the words he, cricketer, and Shakib. Okay, so আমরা বুঝলাম if these are the original word embeddings or dense vectors of each of these words in our sentence, we have to transform the word embeddings in such a way so that the significant words they influence each other, right? By the way, why are we ignoring the words is, a, and, then is, and an, right? Do they not influence the words Shakib, cricketer, he, and all-rounder? They do, but সমস্যাটা হলো a particular words is, a, and, is, কিংবা an, do they contribute to our specific context of Shakib being a cricketer and an all-rounder? They don't, right? একটু পরেই আমরা দেখব, although they do have some contribution, they do have some influence, but it's very negligible compared to what we will have in case of Shakib, cricketer, he, কিংবা all-rounder. So obvious question, right? We understand that the significant words they influence each other. কিন্তু প্রশ্ন হলো how, right? How does it work? How do we transform the word embeddings? Okay, say these are the original word embeddings. Okay, এবং say আমরা জানতে চাই how do we transform the original word embedding of the word Shakib. Basically, how does the word embedding of Shakib, how does it get influenced by the word embedding of all these other words, especially the word embedding of cricketer, he, and all-rounder? Okay, so this particular word embedding of the word Shakib, right? We are focusing on the word Shakib. We are attending, we're putting attention to the word Shakib in particular, right? So this particular word embedding, we call this the query, okay? And all of these word embeddings, right? We have in total 9 word embeddings. So 9টা শব্দ, প্রত্যেকটা শব্দের যে word embedding গুলো রয়েছে, we label them from K1 to K9, right? So these word embeddings from K1 to K9, we call them the keys. Okay, so আমাদের next task হলো, right? We want to understand how do we transform the word embedding of the word Shakib, right? How does the word Shakib take on influence from all of these words? Basically, we have to calculate the influence of all of these word embeddings on our query word Shakib. Okay, so to do that, we perform a dot product between our query word Shakib and all of the keys, and these dot products between our query word Shakib and all of our keys basically reflect the influence of all of the words on the word Shakib, especially these three words. Okay, so how do we calculate the dot product? Say q dot k4, a particular notation tar ortho key, right? What it basically means is we are trying to calculate the influence of the word embedding of the word cricketer on the word embedding of our query word Shakib. Okay, so the dot product between the word embedding or the dense vector of the word Shakib and cricketer looks something like this. Okay, so dot product কিভাবে কাজ করে, right? So we basically take the product of the first values of the two vectors, say 0.3 multiplied by 0.6, then we take the dot product of the second values of both these vectors, 0.9 times 0.7, and so on, right, until the very last element, and we add all of those products and say the final value looks something like this, right? একটা plain scalar value. And this particular value means nothing but the influence of K4 on Q, right? Which basically means the influence of the word embedding of the word cricketer on our query word Shakib. Okay? And what if we perform the dot product between Q and K7? Basically, we are trying to calculate the influence of the word embedding is on our query word Shakib, right? So exactly the same process as we did before, right? We take product of the positional values, so first element times the first element, then second element times the second element, and so on until the very last element. We add all of those products and finally we get something like this. Okay, but did you notice something? কিছু কি আপনি লক্ষ্য করেছেন? The first value 87, it's quite large, right, compared to this particular value 9, which is quite small compared to 87. What this basically means is the influence of K4 on query Q is much greater compared to the influence of K7 on the query word Q, right? So cricketer has a greater influence on the word Shakib compared to the influence of is on Shakib, right? So similar to K4 and K7, if we do the dot product for all of the original word embeddings, for all of the keys and our query, say we get something like this. So the dot product basically tells us about the influence of all of these keyword embeddings on our query word embedding Shakib. Okay, so ছোট্ট একটা problem, right? It's very clear. আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি the dot product between our query word and K1, it's the largest, and similarly the dot product of Q and K4, it is also a very large value. একইভাবে আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি 82 for K6 and 90 for K9. So এই চারটা value, they're very big compared to other values, right? So it's quite clear they have a greater influence, right? But the problem is we don't know the relative impact, right? আমরা বুঝতে পারছি যে 90, it's definitely greater than 5, but how big is it, right? What's the percentage of influence? So to get the relative impact or influence of all of these word embeddings onto our query word Shakib, we normalize the values in terms of percentage. Okay, so if the total influence combined of all of these words were 100%, ওকে দেন আমরা সহজেই বলতে পারি these four keyword embeddings, they have the greatest influence on our query word Shakib. Okay, so the keyword Shakib, right, which is the query itself, it itself has the greatest impact on itself, right? Then we can see the keyword embedding of the word all-rounder has the second largest impact on the query word Shakib, which is 24%. Then we have the word cricketer. This word embedding has 22% influence on the word Shakib. And the word he, it has 21% influence. But you see the words is, and they have influence which is very negligible, right? 2%, then 1%, right? These words have little to no influence on our query word Shakib. We are almost at the final step of transforming the word embedding of Shakib by taking on the influence of all the other words, including itself. Okay? So these are the influence of the original word embeddings on our query word Shakib, and just before the final step in the original transformer paper তারা যেটা করেছে, instead of referring the original word embeddings as keys, they referred to them as values. Okay, so আমি basically following the convention. Okay, so instead of denoting the original word embeddings as k1 to k9, আমি represent করছি with v1 to v9. Okay, so it's basically the same original word embedding, but instead of keys I'm referring to them as values. Okay, so let me put this table in a different fashion. Okay, so instead of vertical I'm making this horizontal. Okay, so Shakib is a cricketer and he is an all-rounder. Okay, so these are the original word embeddings, okay, from v1 to v9. We are transforming the word embedding of Shakib. So Shakib is our query, and these are the influence that we calculated from the normalized dot product, basically the influence of the original word embeddings on our query word Shakib, right? So now all we have to do to transform the word embedding of our query word Shakib is we would take a mixer. Okay, এখন প্রশ্ন হলো, what is this mixer? It is exactly as the name suggests. Okay, so mixer, it's not an official term, it's something যেটা আমি লিখেছি just to make things easier for you. Okay, so mixer, it basically means a blender যেখানে we take as input our original word embedding Shakib, যেটা কিনা আমাদের query. Why do we take Shakib? Because this is the word that we want to transform. And now all we have to do is very simple, right? Now all we have to do is to take on influence from the word embeddings of each of these words. Okay, so we take 25% of the word Shakib, then only a 2% of the word embedding is, 1% of the word embedding A, 22% of the word embedding cricketer, then again 2% of and, 21% of the word embedding of he, 2% of is, 1% of and finally 24% of the original word embedding of all-rounder. And what is our output? We get the transformed word embedding of Shakib, right? So আমাদের input ছিল the original word embedding of Shakib, right? And what we get is the transformed word embedding of Shakib, right? So what is this transformed? Transformed basically means যে আমাদের এই particular word embedding of Shakib, it is influenced by all of these word embeddings, especially the word embedding of Shakib itself, which was 25%, then cricketer, which was 22%, he 21%, and all-rounder to be 24%. So if this was our original sentence, what we basically did is, for the query word Shakib, we transformed the word embedding of Shakib by taking on influence from all the other words in the sentence, especially these three words. Okay, এখন basically we have to repeat the same process for all the other words. Okay, so for example, if our query word is cricketer, it would take influence from all the other words as well, like Shakib, he, and all-rounder. Similarly, if our query word is he, then it would take influence from all the other words, especially cricketer, Shakib, and all-rounder. Finally, if our query word is all-rounder, then it would take influence from cricketer, he, and Shakib. So did you notice something? কিছু কি খেয়াল করেছেন? This process where we transform the word embeddings for each of these words, they are exactly the same. The only difference is, for each of these cases we only had to change the query word, right? The process is quite simple. আমরা simply একটা query word pick করি, then we take on influence of other words on that particular query word, right? And for each of this process we repeat the same thing. And if you remember from sec to sec models, right, we had to wait for previous words to be processed before we can process the next words. A particular scenario te, do we had to wait for anything? We did not, right? So this is what we mean when we say text processing in transformer architecture, it is parallelizable, right? So basically we are taking on influence from all of the words onto our particular word, query word Shakib. So this is what we mean when we say the transformer architecture processes the texts parallelly. Okay, so all we have to do is we have to pick a particular query word and we have to take on influence of other words on that particular query word, and we have to repeat the same process for all of the significant words, right? And since these tasks are pretty much the same with only difference of changing the query words, we can parallelize the processing, right? Which was not possible in sec to sec model. We can perform these operations of transforming the word embeddings simultaneously. আরেকটা বিষয়, does the length of the sentence matter? Do we have the long range issue? We don't, right? Again, we are picking a particular query word and we are considering the influence of all of the words simultaneously. Doesn't really matter how long the text or sentence really is. So finally, what do we get? We basically transform the original word embeddings where we had to generalize the context from this to this, right? Where the context is more specified, all of the significant words, they pull each other closer, they have an impact and influence on each other. So what did we learn so far? What do we know so far? We know how transformers, they understand context or How do they understand the specific context with the help of self-attention mechanism? What we don't know well yet is how does the transformer produce or predict output sequence? Okay, how does it know what to answer? So Jokhon, when we ask something to ChatGPT, hey ChatGPT, summarize this text for me, right? Or translate this text, okay? Or maybe predict what should come next, right? How does it know what to answer? I get it that it understands the specific context of my input sequence of my sentence, but how does it know what to answer? And why is it so damn good at imitating us humans, right? The simple answer is because it was trained to do so. Okay, it was trained to imitate human behavior. So obvious question, how so?